Hello, my bookish darlings. Hey, it's been a hot minute since I've done a book tag, but I've been recently tagged by Michael Efris of Fit to Read, and he tagged me with the modern literary canon book tag. The original tag was created by Russell at Ink and Paper. So thank you, Michael, and thank you, Russell, for creating this tag. Okay, so this modern literary canon tag only had 3 questions, so you'd think it'd be easy. Well, it was a little harder than I thought. The first question is, what 5 authors form your modern canon's literary foundation? And it's described as authors no longer with us, published in the last 100 years, whose work stood the test of time. Now, as you may know, I mostly just read speculative fiction, meaning science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And when I was thinking about this tag, I was thinking about the early books that formed my love of this genre fiction. And the first one I came up with was Edgar Rice Burroughs. He was born in 1875 and he died in 1950. Many of his books were written over 100 years ago, but just over, so I think he counts. My favorite of his series was the John Carter of Mars series, which was made into I didn't think it was that bad of a movie, but it didn't do that well at the box office, so it was never continued. It's basically about a soldier from the Civil War who is transported to Mars. And Edgar Rice Burroughs did many other series. His most famous is probably Tarzan. I did not care for the Tarzan books, but I did love his Earth's Core books, Pellucidor. And there was a crossover where Tarzan was at the Earth's Core, and I did read that one. He also did a series of Moon Aliens and Venus Aliens, and I liked both of those as well. His writing was mostly published as serials in the old speculative fiction magazines like Fantastic and Weird Tales and of that ilk. I remember I picked him up, it must have been in the 70s, and I had no idea his works were published so long ago. I thought they were just modern releases because they were released with these gorgeous new covers, and I just fell in love with the stories. So I'm going to pick Edgar Rice Burroughs as one of my literary canon foundations. The next author has to be C.S. Lewis. He was born in 1898 and died in 1963. And of course, the reason I'm picking him is because of the Chronicles of Narnia, which again was my foundation for getting into speculative fiction, and I know he is for many other people. I also enjoyed his space trilogy, which is Out of the Silent Planet, Pelulandra, and That Hideous Strength. He did write one more in sort of the speculative vein called The Screwtape Letters about a correspondence between 2 devils. Anyway, Chronicles of Narnia is just one of those special books that has a very unique, nostalgic place in my heart. And I've been known to reread them whenever I'm feeling low or down because it just picks me up and putting me back into that mindset where I just fell in love with reading. And if I pick C.S. Lewis, I'm going to have to also pick J.R.R. Tolkien, born in 1892 and died in 1973. And he really only wrote 2 things that withstood the test of time, and that was The Hobbit and, of course, Lord of the Rings. I discovered Tolkien when I was in middle school. Oh my gosh, that was a game changer in terms of my reading trajectory. And I remember my best friend Mike and I, we were big fans of Tolkien. It felt like we were the only ones who ever discovered Tolkien and wrote to each other in, I believe, those dwarvish runes. And whatever your feelings are about Tolkien, Lord of the Rings definitely set the standard for fantasy novels, and we probably wouldn't have the fantasy novels we do today if it wasn't for Tolkien. Another author that formed the foundation for me, for my literary canon, I'm going to say is Anne McCaffrey with her Dragon Riders of Pern books. Now, the Pern novels kind of look like fantasy because they have dragons in it, but they're really science fiction novels. I just got lost in a world of Pern with the Threadfall and the alien dragons that can form these psychic connections with these human settlers. And of all the Pern books, the White Dragon has to be my absolute favorite, and I did also enjoy her Crystal Singer series. Finally, for my literary canon foundation, I'm going to have to say Robert Heinlein, who, by the way, coined the phrase speculative fiction, if you didn't know. I found Heinlein again in middle school, only this time with his juvenile books. I'm talking about The Star Beast, Red Planet, Podcane, Farmer in the Sky. He wrote about a dozen books that he called his juveniles, where the main characters around usually between 15 and 18. And I know Heinlein hasn't aged as well as maybe some other authors have, being a little bit sexist, especially. But he was a big deal. And when I read Stranger in a Strange Land when I was a freshman in high school, that blew my mind. It was so different than the juvenile fiction I've read before. And there are several of those 60s, 70s books that I just thought were mind-blowing. Fear No Evil, Time Enough for Love, and later Number of the Beast. And by the way, if you're a fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs, Heinlein plays a lot of homage to John Carter of Mars in Number of the Beast. And there are so many other books like Moon is a Harsh Mistress, The Puppet Masters, Farnham's Freehold, that place Heinlein as sort of the grandfather of modern science fiction. Now, that question was hard simply because there are just so many great science fiction, fantasy, horror authors out there. Octavia Butler, Ursula Le Guin, Asimov, Clarke, Bradbury, Frank Herbert that aren't here anymore. But the ones I picked were just the ones that formed my personal basis for reading. The next question is, what 5 still living authors do you believe have a literary legacy that's already firmly established as modern classics? Well, the first author I'm going to list is Larry Niven, born in 1938. And I did first put him in the first category until I realized, hey, he's not dead yet. Larry Niven was one of my favorite science fiction authors in high school. Ringworld just blew me away. He also wrote The Protector. He wrote a bunch of these Man-Zin Wars with Jerry Pournelle. He wrote some classics, Lucifer's Hammer, Mote in God's Eye. But he's still active. Fleet of Worlds didn't come out that long ago, which is based on one of his Ringworld aliens, the Puppeteers, one of my favorite aliens. And I did enjoy Fleet of Worlds quite a lot. The next author is going to be Stephen King, born in 1947. And I think he is without a doubt one of the most influential writers in the 20th and 21st century, starting with Carrie. He wrote The Stand, The Shining, Firestarter, the Dark Tower series. So many of his books have been made into movies. He is still prolific. But of all living writers, I don't think there is one more influential than Stephen King. And for me, what makes his writing so great is his characters. Whatever book I read, I am just so drawn into his characterizations that I just feel as though I am reading real people. It's amazing. And if I pick Stephen King, I'm going to have to pick another horror author, Clive Barker, born in 1952. He started with collections of short stories called The Books of Blood. Then he went on to write Weave World and Magica. He wrote some middle grades. I think he may be most well known for Hellraiser, which was based on one of his novels, but he was also a director. For me, Clive Barker is almost a literary writer on the prose level. His mastery of language is just so gorgeous and beautiful while being grotesque and disturbing at the same time. The next author I'm going to pick is Neil Gaiman, born in 1960. I first started reading him with The Sandman, the DC comic that was recently made into a Netflix series. But he also wrote American Gods, Good Omens with Terry Pratchett, The Graveyard Book, of course everyone knows Coraline. There is just something about his writing that makes you feel as though you are reading modern fairy tales. I do believe Neil Gaiman is a standard bearer when it comes to modern literary canon. The next author I'm going to pick is Robin Hobb, born in 1952, for her Elderlings Chronicles. The Elderlings is just a classic, I think, masterpiece made up of several different series, starting with the Farseer series, the Live Ship Traders, Tawny Man, Rain Wild, and Fitz and the Fool. Each of those are trilogies or quartets that stand on their own, but they connect together in this Elderlings universe. I truly believe that these are classic fantasies, and Robin Hobb, I think, will go down in history for her world building of the Elderlings. I think it's Elderlings Chronicles or Saga. By the way, I also really loved her other trilogy, Soldier Son trilogy, that is not in the Elderlings universe, but really showcases her amazing world building. Okay, the very last question is, what 5 authors who are currently writing, i.e. have released a book in the last 10 years, do you believe are building the literary future? Well, of course, I'm going to say N.K. Jemisin, born 1972, and I'm sure many other people doing this tag is going to pick her. She wrote the Broken Earth trilogy. Each novel in that trilogy won a Hugo Award. That's never been done before. I also enjoyed her first fantasy series, 100,000 Kingdoms, and I am currently enjoying the City We Became. I believe it's a duology. The next author I'm going to pick is Fonda Lee, born in 1979, simply for her Green Bone trilogy. I thought that was a remarkable trilogy. I felt it was almost historical when it came to its metaphors with the Cold War, which I grew up with. Many of you may have at least studied it, and I am expecting great things from Fonda Lee. Another author that I think is going to be very influential is R.F. Kuang, born in 1996, who wrote The Poppy Wars. I thought that was a magnificent anti-hero trilogy. You don't see many anti-hero novels really taking off like The Poppy Wars did, but mostly because Babel, I think, already is a classic. I am shocked when I hear other booktubers say that they weren't that impressed with Babel, and they point to maybe the relationships were that intense among the friend group, and I have a feeling a lot expect more of a romance, but R.F. Kuang really doesn't do romance. And like I said about Fonda Lee and her Greenbone books sort of being a metaphor of the Cold War, I think Babel, the magic system, is a metaphor for cultural appropriation. I think it's a very important book, and I expect great things going forward for R.F. Kuang. The next author I'm going to pick maybe will surprise you, I don't know, but it's going to be Tamsyn Muir for the Locked Tomb series. I did not enjoy the second book of this series that much, but I recognized it did some very experimental, interesting things with plot and character. But what I am amazed with Tamsyn Muir is every book she's done in this series is so different. At least the voice is different. The plots are just so complicated and maybe convoluted. Probably not the author for everyone, but I think literarily speaking, she is a significant force. After reading the third book in the Locked Tomb series, None of the Ninth, I can't imagine Tamsyn Muir not having a big influence on science fiction and fantasy, or speculative fiction in general. She is just that interesting of a writer. Finally, the last author I'm going to pick is Becky Chambers, again born in 1985, same year as Tamsyn Muir. And I haven't read that much of Becky Chambers' writing, except for the Monk and Robot books. And these are called solar punk. So what is solar punk? Solar punk is a new subgenre of science fiction that looks to the future and optimistically sees a sustainable future where the environment is saved through embracing sustainable technology. The Monk and Robot books are prime examples of this. The two novellas she's written so far is Psalm for the Wild Built and Prayer for the Crown Shy, based on the world of Panga, where there is a utopia where humans and nature live in a harmonious balance with each other. Becky Chambers' writing is so simple and beautiful and delve into subjects I think that really resonate for a lot of people, at least for me. And she's just one of those writers that I hope is going to have an influence on the literary landscape, because not only is her writing hopeful, but it is just deep and meaningful, I think. Okay, who am I going to tag? Let's go ahead and tag Sarah from Voyage Through Worlds. Let's tag Eric from Break Even Books. I'm not sure if Eric does tags anymore. We used to tag each other a lot, but let's see if he'll do this one. And how about my drag queen sister, Say Kavi? Ball is in your court. And if you want to do this tag, please go ahead and do it. If you want to put your answers in the comments below, I would love that. And if you're in the comments, go ahead and like this video. And how about subscribing to my channel? Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.